Horror Nights presents 4 terrifying and disturbing true Uber horror stories. Number 4. Ryan McCarthy's Terrible Ride. Around 11 a.m. on December 1st, 2014, Ryan McCarthy of Los Angeles, California, ordered an Uber driver to pick him up from his dentist appointment and take him back to work. A few minutes after he got into the car, the driver said to him, "So your daughter's name is Leslie, right?" McCarthy was a bit taken aback, and he said, "How did you know that?" "I know a lot about you," the driver said. "I know that Leslie is 16 years old, and at this very minute she is skipping class. She's at her boyfriend's house. I also know that your wife is at work on Hill Street. Your parents, Gerald and Rebecca, they're in their house at Queen Anne's place." "What the hell is going on?" McCarthy asked him. "I know that because I have men at each of their locations. They are expecting a call from me in exactly 7 minutes. If they do not get the call, they will walk in and execute every single member of your family." "Wait, what are you talking about?" McCarthy was shocked, and he didn't believe it was real. He also didn't notice that the car had come to a stop. The man turned to him and threw a paper bag with something heavy in it into the back seat. "You're going to take that gun. Then you're going to walk into that bank and rob it." He pointed to a bank a few feet from the car. "Once you hand me the money in that paper bag, I call off the hits. If you don't get back out here in, let's see, 5 minutes with the money, your family dies. You decide to be stupid and shoot me, your family dies. You only have one option that allows your family to live, and you now have a little more than 4 minutes to accomplish it. Take the paper bag so they can put the money in it." McCarthy sat in his seat, shocked. He had no idea what to do. "Clock's ticking, man," the Uber driver said. McCarthy looked in the paper bag, and there was a handgun in it. He pulled it out of the bag and was surprised at how light it was. "Careful, it's loaded. You may need those bullets to get out of the bank. Because don't forget, if you don't get out, your family is dead. So do anything that you can to get the money and get out. Oh, and leave your cell phone here." McCarthy felt like there was only one thing he could do. He took out his cell phone and dropped it onto the seat. His legs felt like jello, but he walked into the bank. Once he got inside, he pointed the gun in the air and fired a shot. He had never fired a gun before, and it startled him. That's when McCarthy heard another gunshot. He turned to his left and saw a security guard pointing a gun at him, with smoke coming out of the barrel. McCarthy pointed his gun at the security guard and fired, hitting him in the chest, and the security guard fell to the ground. Then McCarthy heard a scream from the counter and he panicked. He turned the gun towards the screaming and fired. Blood splattered the back wall of the bank as the bullet traveled through a young woman's head. "Money, now!" McCarthy screamed and gave them the paper bag that held the gun. The remaining 2 bank tellers packed it full of money. Then McCarthy walked back out of the waiting car that had the passenger window open. McCarthy pointed the gun at the driver, but he seemed unfazed. "You've got about 20 seconds. Put the money in the car." McCarthy stared at him and dropped the bag with the money in the front passenger seat. The man then took his foot off the brake, put it on the gas, and drove away. As he did, he threw McCarthy's cell phone out the window. McCarthy considered shooting at the man, but he needed him to make the call. Instead, he picked up his cell phone off of the road. It was wet, like it had been dropped in a cup of water. It was not working. The police arrived less than a minute later and arrested McCarthy. As he was being arrested, he pleaded with the police to check on his family. When they went to his parents' home, they found them dead. Both of them had been shot. His wife and daughter didn't show up at school or work. They were found murdered in their home, again shot to death. Both had been killed several hours before they were found. The ballistics were tested, and the same gun used to kill his family was the same one that McCarthy used in the robbery that left the security guard and the teller dead. When the police investigated, they couldn't find the Uber driver's profile or a record of McCarthy's request for a ride. McCarthy swore his phone must have been hacked, but the police thought it made more sense that he just made up the story about the driver. They said that he shot his wife and daughter, drove over to his parents' house and killed them before hitting up the bank. They couldn't figure out a motive, but assumed he snapped, killed his family, and planned to run away after robbing the bank. Another problem with the police's story was that they couldn't explain what happened to the money after McCarthy left the bank. Nevertheless, he was convicted of 6 murders, and he was sentenced to life without parole. Number 3. Leanna Lemasters' passenger. Around 11 p.m. on June 6, 2016, 22-year-old Leanna Lemaster went to pick up her passenger near a beach in Grand Bend, Ontario. When she pulled over, a young woman emerged from the darkened beach and got in the back passenger side. Leanna didn't check the driver's profile on her phone, but assumed the young woman was the passenger. The young woman was pale, and her hair and clothes were soaking wet. Lemaster figured that the seat was already wet, and it was probably just best to drive the young woman to her location and get her out of the car quickly. As she drove, Lemaster tried to talk to the young woman, but she was silent. So the rest of the ride was quiet except for the sound of the car and pop music that played quietly on the radio. However, when Lemaster got to the passenger's destination, the young woman was no longer in the car. Lemaster couldn't figure it out. The longest she stopped was for a second at a stop sign, and she didn't hear the door open or close. It was as if the young woman vanished into thin air. When Lemaster touched the back seat where the young woman sat, it was wet. Lemaster was spooked by the whole thing and went home. She told her boyfriend what happened, and he agreed that it was creepy. He went to bed not long afterwards, but Lemaster couldn't sleep. She called 2 friends and told them the story, and they also thought it was very weird. Had it not come from someone as rational and logical as Lemaster, they wouldn't have believed the story. The next morning, Lemaster's boyfriend couldn't find her in their apartment. He checked outside and saw that her car was still there, and he also found her phone on the kitchen table. He assumed she just walked to the store and had forgotten her cell phone. About an hour and a half later, he was worried, and he was about to head out the door to look for her when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered it, and it was the police department. Lemaster's dead body was found on the beach this morning in the same area where she picked up her last passenger. Sadly, Lemaster had drowned. The police thought Lemaster committed suicide, but her friends and family swore that she was not suicidal. The boyfriend also checked her email account, and she had gotten an email from Uber telling her that she charged a fare to someone she didn't pick up on the night that she died, meaning the young woman she picked up was not the passenger who ordered the ride. Her family has no idea who the young woman in the back seat was, or if she was connected to Lemaster's death. However, others contend that something much more supernatural happened on that night. Number 2. The Friendly Driver. Gemma and Brad Schuster lived in a rural area just outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and on November 24, 2016, they wanted to go to a nearby bar, so they ordered a ride from Uber. A few minutes later, 44-year-old Otto Branson picked them up at their house. He drove quietly as the young married couple chatted in the back seat. Branson was doing the speed limit, and a guy behind him in a pickup truck kept tailgating him, so Branson tapped his brakes. The guy behind him honked his horn, passed Branson, and when he pulled in front of Branson's car, he slammed on his brakes, prompting Branson to come to a full stop. The young man driving the pickup truck got out of his truck and he looked drunk and angry. The Schusters told Branson to just drive away. Instead, he got out of the car and walked towards Schuster. Without warning, Branson swung a tire iron that he had hidden up his sleeve at the young man's head. It connected and he fell to the ground. Branson continued to beat the young man's head in front of his car's headlights while the Schusters watched on in horror. Branson then calmly walked back to the car covered in blood and brain matter and got in and drove away. As he drove, he said, "That was self-defense, right?" When the Schusters didn't say anything, he said, "It was him or me, right?" "Yes, yes," Brad Schuster said, deciding it was better to agree with the maniac than to annoy him. "All right then," Branson said. "I'm going to drop you off at your destination. We don't want the police to find out about this because it will just complicate matters when we all know that it was self-defense. Who knows what could happen if the police got involved? Maybe they'll even find this tire iron covered in that guy's brains at your place. I'll drop it off there before you can get the police there. That's just one way. But there is a whole bunch of ways this would complicate your life if you went to the police. And life is much too short for complications. So it's probably just best if we keep this quiet, right?" They had come to a stop at the bar, so the Schusters got out of the car and Branson drove off into the night. They had no idea what to do. They talked about calling the police, but if the murder weapon was planted on their property, how could they explain it? If they went home and disposed of it, that was a crime. Not turning in the driver was also a crime. On the other hand, did they want to be tied up in a murder story for several years? A story about an Uber driver killing someone in a road rage incident in front of passengers was bound to make the news statewide, if not nationally. Did they really want to be any part of that? They decided that it would be best to go home and take care of the murder weapon. Ironically, they had no ride and were forced to get another Uber driver to take them home. Luckily, their driver was not Branson. As they were being driven home, the new Uber driver said he had to take a different road because there was an accident or something on the route that he usually would have taken to get to the Schusters' house. When the Schusters got home, they found the murder weapon hidden in their shed. Despite being drunk, Brad Schuster drove to the bay, threw the tire iron in the water, and then drove back home. The Schusters did not sleep at all, and the next day was the longest day of their lives. They kept sitting around, waiting for the police to knock at the door, but no one came. The local news identified the young man as Frederick Carrion and said it was a road rage incident. They also said that the police did not have any suspects. The Schusters went to work on Monday, and while they were on edge, they got through it. They talked about it when they got home and thought that all of this would go away soon. They just had to stay calm and wait it out. However, an odd thing happened on Monday night. There was a knock at their door. They looked out their front window and thought it would be the cops, but they were shocked to see Branson's car in the driveway. They opened the door a crack and Branson was there with a six-pack of beer. "The Packers are playing on Monday Night Football. I thought since we had something so strong to bond over, we could watch the game together." We're not feeling well, not tonight," Brad Schuster immediately said. "Oh, come on, guys. When did the Packers get a chance to play Monday Night Football?" He looked around at the exterior of their house. "You sure do have a nice house here," he said, and smiled at the Schusters. Taking that as a veiled threat, they let Branson in. He sat in the middle of the couch and opened 3 beers. Throughout the game, he talked about his weird hobbies, like taxidermy and pickling foods, his profound love for the movie The Human Centipede, and his deep appreciation of Katy Perry's music. He also talked about how he didn't get along with his mother, because she had been trying to get him to move out since his 40th birthday. One thing that the Schusters did notice was that he seemed completely unfazed by the fact that he beat in a stranger's head just 48 hours prior. After he left, the Schusters decided that they had to sell their house and get out of town. The next morning, they called in sick to their jobs and called a real estate agent. They spent the rest of their day applying for jobs when there was a knock at the door. It was Branson. This time, he didn't wait for an invite. He pushed himself in. "Why are you selling the house?" he screamed at them. "Leaving town right after someone has been killed is a good way to get caught. I thought we were friends." Gemma Schuster, who hadn't slept in days, decided that there was only one thing that she could do. She picked up a fire poker and swung it as hard as she could at Branson's temple. The hook on the poker went directly into his skull, and Branson fell to the ground, twitching. After he was dead, the Schusters knew they were in too deep. For reasons they couldn't explain, they thought the best course of action was to dissect the body and dispose of the tissue and the organs through the kitchen's waste disposal unit. After doing so, they buried the bones in some forested area outside the city. They accepted the first job offer and house offer that they were given and moved to Milwaukee less than a week after killing Branson. However, they were arrested a short time later because the new owners of their old house had a problem with the plumbing, and the plumber discovered human remains in the pipes. The couple was arrested for murder, and they're set to go on trial in the spring of 2017. Number 1. What happened to Nick Grimsby? In July 2015, Nick Grimsby of Pasadena, California, had been driving for Uber for 3 months. On July 19th, he walked out the door to do a drive, and he disappeared. He told his wife, Cassandra, that he was just driving someone who lived close by, and he was dropping them off at the hospital. He said he was going to stick around the hospital for a few minutes to see if he could get a customer on the way back, but he said he would not be gone for longer than an hour. When he did not return after 3 hours and didn't answer his phone, Cassandra called the police. The police looked into it, but Uber had no record of the request. The police told Cassandra that Nick had probably just run off and he'd be back in a few days. Then, about 3 days after he disappeared, Nick's wife, Cassandra, got a strange phone call, and she was sure it was Nick on the phone. He was talking fast, but he said that he picked up a woman in his car and she looked sick. Her skin was a waxy yellow color, and she had an unnaturally large gut. Nick said he got a bad feeling about the woman right away, but he let her in. She didn't say anything as he drove, but after being in the cab for a few minutes, she let out a burp and a putrid-smelling red smoke came out of her mouth. He said it smelled worse than spoiled milk. Nick pulled over the car and got out. The woman did too, and she was still spewing out smoke. Nick called 911 and the woman got out of the car. On the ground, the woman found a broken bottle. As Nick talked to the dispatcher, the woman used the glass to cut open her belly. When she did, slimy centipedes fell out of the wound. Nick started to run away when several black SUVs showed up on the street. Men and women in hazmat suits got out and started to crush the bugs which weren't moving fast. Nick said it was because they looked soft, like they had just been born. The people in the hazmat suits arrested Nick, and now Nick didn't know where he was. They had locked him in a room, but he managed to escape and stole a cell phone. He said he needed help, but then suddenly there was a loud voice that said, "What are you doing, damn it? We have a code red. I repeat, a code red." Then the call went dead. After the call, Cassandra went to the police, but they didn't believe her story. So Cassandra did her own investigation, and she found out that a woman who lived in the next neighborhood named Maria Everhart also went missing the day that Nick did. Again, Cassandra went to the police, and they told her that Nick and Maria probably ran away together. Nick and Maria have not been seen since they left, and the police believe that Cassandra made up the story, even though she passed multiple lie detector tests. Subscribe for more.